Good morning and welcome to Mailbag, everybody. It's a Monday morning mailbag on a Tuesday afternoon. This is the walk off. We really appreciate you, the grounds crew, tuning in, listening, hitting that like button, subscribing on YouTube. All of the listeners who are audio fans on wherever you get your podcasts, we really appreciate you too. This is what we do every single week as we comb through your week's interactions and try and answer and get to as many comments as we can. Now, you can always reach out on Twitter at Walk Off Podcast, on Instagram, the Walk Off Podcast. You can leave your comments in YouTube, or if you are supporting the channel, number one, we really thank you. We couldn't do this without Patreon. But if you are paying that $4 a month for the extra content, MLB Mondays every Monday, to get instant access to all of our interviews, to get the Patreon bump, as we call it on Mailbag, well, we thank you very much. And of course, questions and comments get in here automatically. On that, let's dive in here. Now, I will say we missed the last couple Friday shows. I know there were a few comments in there about that. We do apologize. We'll be doing our best to get interviews for the Friday show and continue to go throughout the off season. If we miss some here and there, that's just unfortunately the way she goes. So, going to Twitter. Jason DM'd us yesterday. He goes, "Hey boys, did you see Emmanuel Clase was nominated for the AL Cy Young? Question mark, question mark, question mark. What the hell? Did these voters not watch the playoffs? LOL." So first of all, thank you, Jason. Appreciate you reaching out. That is true. They did announce the Cy Young. They announced the MVPs. They announced the Rookie of the Year nominees. All the awards were announced. And it is true. Emmanuel Clase, a reliever, was nominated for the AL Cy Young Award along with Tarek Skubal. No surprise there. The Detroit Tigers ace kind of put that team on his back and carried them into the playoffs after a very woeful start to the season. Seth Lugo also nominated, of course, breakout year for him with the Royals. Yeah, Emmanuel Clase did shit the bed in the playoffs. Guys, you need to remember here, keep in the old memory banks, folks, that playoffs don't matter with these awards. They're not voting on the playoffs. I mean, if my guess is now there will be a bias that will not allow Clase to win because of his playoffs, right? But for the nomination, he deserved the nod. Adam, do you agree with that? I mean, maybe I'll give you a second here to quickly pull up Clase's numbers on the season because he did have an absolutely incredible year with the Cleveland Guardians. And a big reason why the Guardians wound up in the ALCS was because of the strength of that bullpen anchored by Emmanuel Clase.
He had in 74 innings pitched a 0.659 whip and a 0.61 ERA.
That's
Okay.
elite.
Yeah. Led the American League in saves, 47. Yeah,
If
I
you're
don't know what
voting
else to say. I
Adam,
mean,
does he
his
wind
numbers are
up
so good.
third in that list of Lugo and Skubal? How do you feel about a reliever getting a Cy Young nod just to begin with?
I mean, the cliche of like, oh, it's an honor just to be nominated really applies to relievers. I think we can agree on that, right?
Yeah.
Um, is Gagne the last reliever to win?
I think he was
That would have been
2004.
2004.
Yeah.
But he had 60 plus saves that season. I feel like it was I know it was a record of consecutive saves
Yeah.
without a blown save, but that wrapped around to the previous year, right? Like it was 6 or 7 at the end of one season, and then another like 65 the following season. But either
Yeah,
way, like
I think he topped out at 88, I think was his record there.
84 straight
84.
save
Yeah.
conversions from August 28th. Oh shit. August 28th, 2002 until July 3rd, 2004. I didn't realize it wrapped 2 seasons.
Yeah. Pretty
So,
incredible. Pretty
um,
incredible. For those of you who missed it, by the way, we did wind up having Eric Gagne on the show. So if you want to, it's pretty much an evergreen interview. We were just talking about the streak and where he feels baseball's at right now. Had a really good talk with him about injuries and just how he feels truly um, more work might be better on the arm than less work the way that they're running it right now. So yeah, you can definitely check out the Eric Gagne interview on our YouTube page or wherever you get your listening audio.
stat correction here. 55 saves is what he did in 2003,
Right.
in which he finished first in Cy Young votes.
Right.
Um, yeah, so will or should Clase win? Like you said, probably not. I wouldn't have an issue if he did. I mean, I wouldn't hold the playoffs against him at all, as hard as that is to do. But I think the people voting recognize what they're voting for.
Mm-hmm.
Um, Sometimes you just vote for exceptionalism, just cause, you know? Like
And
I
he
don't
was
know.
that. He was
Right.
that.
So that's
Grounds crew would love to hear from you. Drop your comments here. Where are you at on Emmanuel Clase as a Cy Young nominee? And even more to the crux of this question, how do you feel about relievers in general getting a nod? How exceptional do they need to be to become a Cy Young candidate?
you know what I would have to do? I'd have to go back to 2003 and look at the other nominees
Mm-hmm.
when Eric Gagne won, right? Like who did he beat out?
Mm-hmm.
Was there a standout elite starting pitcher that I'm blanking on right now? Was Pedro Martinez or Kurt Schilling having a career year and Gagne won because of the streak? I don't know, right? Like,
I mean, they were. Luckily for him, he was in the NL while they were in the AL.
all right, you fucker. I can't think of any NL pitchers at the moment.
Yes.
I just watched the comeback on Netflix, so
Yes.
that whole Red Sox team is in my mind right
Fresh
now.
in the memory banks.
Was
What a great
Bronson
era.
Arroyo having the career year of his
Yeah.
life? I can think of Bronson Arroyo before I can think of a single NL pitcher in this moment. Um, I will say that 2003 season, looking at like the strikeout numbers, the walk numbers, the whip numbers, Clase better ERA,
Mhm.
0.61, Gagne 1.2. But we always say ERA not the best measurement of a relief pitcher. I'm not sure why, but that's what they say. Conventional wisdom, I'll play along. As far as
Sample
whip
size.
goes,
Yes.
as far
Walks,
as whip,
hits, innings pitched.
oh, hold on. You're saying sample size is why?
For ERA, yes.
Doesn't that apply to fucking every stat though, then? I don't want to
Well,
go down this rabbit hole.
no. I just mean like sample size on relievers is going to be a lot smaller than on starting pitchers, right? So if they have a blow up game, their ERA is going to be insanely high, let's say,
Hey,
or
doesn't that also a one blow up game inflate their whip? Walks and hits per inning pitched. If you're only pitching 74 innings instead of 180.
yeah.
This is the only reason why I think like it's not whatever.
But I
Anyways,
think in a small sample size, the walks, hits, innings pitched is going to be more accurate as
stabler.
to their. their actual performance.
Maybe,
That's my
maybe.
opinion, anyways. I mean, what the fuck
I
do we know?
I will accept comparing ERA of a reliever to ERA of a starter is an apples to oranges thing. Like
Mhm.
that's not maybe a fair comparison, but I would say ERA reliever versus reliever is totally valid. It's the same rough sample size, roughly 70-ish innings. And whatever. Like I said, I really don't want to go down this rabbit hole. I'm sorry I even brought it up. Um, Clase's numbers, whip, better than Gagne's, 0.659. Gagne, when he won the Cy Young, 0.692. So
Wow.
like 0.04 better. Here's where he, okay, one more that he beat Gagne in, walks per nine. Gagne, 2.2 walks per nine. Clase, 1.2 walks per nine. Almost half.
Strikeouts. Strikeouts is where,
Strikeouts is the
yeah,
difference
Gagne,
maker.
like, yeah, was a
So
beast.
spoiler alert, Clase, 8 strikeouts per nine. Eric Gagne, 15 strikeouts per nine. 18 is the max. No, what is the max? Strikeouts per nine. Why am I? 27 is the max.
Yeah, 27
Right.
is the
So like
max.
more than half the batters struck out.
Yeah, unreal.
Wild. Anyways, we're really splitting hairs on two absolute beasts in the bullpen. So kudos to both of those guys. I don't know. I wouldn't be totally shocked if Clase won the Cy Young. Here's here's a, here's what I will say. I don't think the playoffs. I mean, obviously the 27 ERA and 11 WHIP in the playoffs, like he really imploded against the Yankees there. I don't think that should hurt his votes. But I think if he dominated in the playoffs, that would have, even though it shouldn't,
It would have
would
tipped the scale,
have
probably.
helped
Yeah.
his votes a little bit. Like they would have looked at that as a little bit of a tiebreaker, I think, for any voter, eligible voters who's on the fence and then just watched him be absolutely elite in the playoffs too.
And this,
Would tip
Adam,
the
is where I
scales.
think Tark Skubal just takes it because
I
of the run
agree.
he went on in September, bringing them into the playoffs and just how well. I know it's not supposed to
Mhm.
count, right? The playoffs aren't supposed to count, but I think there is going to be. It's tough, like as a human, to just ignore information right? Like
Mhm.
you're like, I know
Yeah,
it's
no,
not
for
supposed to
sure.
count, but I do know what happened here. So,
Yeah,
yeah.
yeah, for
All
sure.
right. Moving on
So
to the
Freddie
next question.
Freeman, NL MVP of the season is what we're saying.
That's right. That's right.
Okay.
Moving on, Amanda messaged us on Twitter and goes, "Hey, Scott and Adam, are you guys making a Bluesky account as well? A lot of Twitter is heading over there. I'd follow you if you make an account, smiley face." Well, first of all, thank you, Amanda. Secondly, yes, we are. We moved to Bluesky, added that to our social media repertoire, if you will. I made an account yesterday. And
Nice.
there has been a lot of people moving from Twitter to Bluesky. So yeah, follow us at Walk Off Podcast. I'm not as sure about like it always, I'm old. It takes me a little while to get the hang of any new platform. So give me a little breathing room. I'm not exactly sure how the messaging and stuff works, but feel free to message me there. And
I try and stay off social media as
yeah,
much as I can. Not good for this
yeah,
line of work, but I'd never heard of it until I read this question.
yeah,
I looked into it. It looks like it's Twitter.
yes.
Okay.
But it's Twitter without all of the politics constantly shoved down your throat nonstop. That was the one thing I really liked about Twitter when we first got on it, buddy, is that you could really curate like this, like super intensified baseball only kind of world. And then Elon bought it and did his best to make sure that I knew darn well what was going on in politics in countries that weren't my own. And really happy that there's an option to
So
just be in baseball land again.
so now that all the conservatives are unbanned on Twitter, Blue Sky is where all the liberals can go and be liberals
Oh,
without conservatives being shitty to them?
I'm, I,
Is that it?
yeah, I mean, I don't know.
That's just my interpretation.
This is
I
how
don't.
ignorant I am. I was just like, because for me, dude, I just don't give a fuck. I'm like, why do I have to watch American politics nonstop? Like, you block, you mute, you just try and stay in Blue Jays land, and they make it impossible. But
Yeah, fair enough.
maybe it is uh revenge of the what is it? I can't say libtard. That's not the word.
Libtard. Wow. Okay. Well, we're getting taken down for that one, I'm sure.
Yeah.
Yeah. No, I don't know. It's you'll be on Blue Sky
Maybe
managing
it
the
is a
walk-off
safe
account.
space for liberals. Maybe that's what it is. I just like it that
It looks exactly like Twitter.
it looks exactly like Twitter, which is what they were
So
going for, I think.
must be someone who was fired from Twitter, went over and just rewrote the
Well,
code,
everyone
put a
was
different
fired
logo
from
on.
Twitter.
That's what I mean.
Yeah,
That's what I mean. So one of
yeah.
those 10,000 folk was just like, hey, I have the code memorized. Let's type it in and away we go. Put up a new logo.
One thing I will say that is super annoying, dude, about Twitter now is that you used to be able to block and then it wouldn't come up again. I never block interactions, but I will
Okay.
block annoying people. Sorry. If you
Hmm.
annoy me, I am going to block you. I just don't want to see you.
That's fair.
But then he did this thing where, yeah, you're blocked, but their feeds still come up in your feed. And it's like, why am I even, what?
Yeah, that's weird. That's
Yeah.
weird. Yeah.
Freedom of speech,
Yeah. I don't
buddy.
know. There you
Yeah.
go.
All right. Um, that got way more political than I wanted it to say that we were on Blue Sky as well.
This is the thing with a site like Blue Sky or anything though, is the effort to not be political is political.
I guess
The
so,
irony
eh?
in that,
Yeah,
right? So
that is
no
ironic.
statement is a statement, is what they say, right? Silence is violence, as they say. So
Uh, they say a lot of things, buddy. They say a lot of things.
my body, my choice, except for vaccines. Okay, well, all the tinfoil hats are coming out now for sure. So I can't wait to see the comment section on
Are
this
there
one.
any more hot button issues we can just touch on and move on from real quick here?
What are your thoughts on the pipeline?
Yeah,
Okay, moving on.
yeah.
I meant the Jays prospect pipeline, is what I meant.
William DM'd us. He said, "Hey guys, always enjoy the podcast. Sure does feel like we need to win a bunch of trades this offseason to have any chance in 2025. I know you guys don't like speculating, but indulge me. Who would be your number one trade target?" So, uh to start with, thanks for reaching out. Interesting question. Um I will start with saying that the win a bunch of trades comment, I'm fine with win-win trades. I know people aren't. I saw this the other day. This is a comment from Mike Elias, who is the general manager for the Baltimore Orioles, and he's talking about the Corbin Burns trade.
Okay.
Um, I just had it written out here. What did I do with that? Right. So it was Corbin Burns traded to the Orioles last offseason for Joey Ortiz, who was the number 63 prospect in baseball last year, uh, from the Milwaukee Brewers, one of their top prospects, DL Hall, and then a draft pick, a prospect. Uh, in the, anyways,
Mhm.
I'm going off memory here because I wrote this all down and then I can't find the sheet of paper that I wrote it on.
That's
So
fine.
there we go. Anyways, so Joey Ortiz actually wound up working out very well for the Milwaukee Brewers last year. He had a 2.7 war, played second base, played third base, played some shortstop. He had 440 ABs, worked out really well for the Milwaukee Brewers, who wound up winning that AL Central. And I mean, true NL Central, sorry. And truly, I don't think the Orioles would have been where they were in 2024 had it not been for Corbin Burns at the top. of that staff acting as the race. So this is what Elias said. I wish we had made better use of him in the playoffs, but I think the trade kind of worked for both teams. And that's a rare thing, but it's kind of what both teams are hoping for when you go into a trade. And I'm always happy when the trade goes that way. Our players, when we trade our players and they do well elsewhere, I think that benefits us because I think it gives your trading partners confidence that you're willing to give up good players who've been developed well and you're not hiding anything. So there is a benefit in both teams winning a trade. And I know that most fans are always excited when it's lopsided, right? I know
Mhm.
personally as a Jays fan, that Josh Donaldson trade, I mean, I still look back and I'm like, talk about a master class, right? AA getting
Mhm.
it done.
Mhm.
But there is a disadvantage to completely fleecing a team and then hoping to deal with them 3 years down the road again, right? There's definitely going to be some trepidation on some organizations' part if every time they do a deal with the Tampa Bay Rays, they wind up with the short end of the stick. So you do kind of shrink your trading partners the more often you do that. And I mean, yes, there's obviously something to be said for the other organizations kind of fucking it up, right? Like
Mhm.
you need smarts on both end to create a win-win trade. So I don't know if the Jays like winning a bunch of trades is necessarily the best thing, but winning would be great, right? And it's kind of like Elias says there, where there is value in showing that the players you're trading, the prospects you're moving were well developed, and that you can trust the Orioles system to turn out high end prospects. And that when you go and get a number 50 prospect that is from within the Orioles system, that there's a good chance that you're dealing with someone of value. Now, as
So
for the
who's your
second
guy?
part of the question, I've already said it. I want Brent Rooker and I want Mason Miller. I want us to be knocking on that Oakland Athletics door nonstop. What do I think it would take? Some high end prospects. I think that
Oh, if only we
I've
had
mentioned
some.
this before. I think Ricky Tiedemann going into Tommy John surgery here, not being available till 2026 at 21 years old. So he'll be 23 by the time he's ready to pitch. Still youthful, still a lot of upside, left handed. There is true value with Ricky Tiedemann, a guy who isn't going to contribute to the Blue Jays. Unfortunately, they were hoping he'd contribute this year. He's not going to be even available for another year. So maybe timeline wise, with the A's not even having a real home right now, right? Floating in Sacramento, playing out of a AAA ballpark, and not really slated to be in Las Vegas, their new home, until at least 2028, maybe even longer. It might work well for them to get a guy like Ricky Tiedemann, who, you know, high end prospect, but you're not going to be able to use him for a couple years. And maybe the Jays can get something done with that. I don't know. I would love Brent Rooker. I think Mason Miller would completely solve our problems in the bullpen. Having that real stud, you can kind of take some flyers on some other guys and cross your fingers that the bullpen does what bullpens do sometimes and just become fine.
I like it. I like it. Here's a bullpen target I'd be interested in. Devin Williams
Yes.
with the Brewers.
Yes.
Um, he's due for 8.4 million in the final year of his contract with the Brewers. Um,
And you folks might remember too that the Brewers are a team that does this, right? They did it last year with Corbin Burns. They did it the year before with Josh Hader. They will move some of these high end guys within their system and then compete the next year. So maybe a Devin Williams is available. And like I said with Mason Miller, right? If you've got a stud at the back end, it really just bolsters everything in a
yep.
bullpen. So I would love Devin Williams.
Let's talk positionally. I want to feast on the corpse that is the 121 loss Chicago White Sox.
Yes.
And I mean, we talked this about a month ago, like reclamation projects, you know, our guy with upside who stinks lately for your guy with upside who stinks lately. Um, I don't know how the White Sox feel about Louis Robert Jr.
Hmm.
center field. Worst year of his career this season. 657 OPS, down from an 857 the year before.
How many years of control does Luis Robert Jr. have on? 2 more years?
So here's the full picture. He is 27 years old. Um, he is in a 6-year, $50 million deal with the White Sox. He's owed 15 million this season, 2025, and then there is a club option for 2026 and 2027 at $20 million each. It is not an opt out for both of them. It is year by year is this opt out. So
Okay.
we it is a very appealing contract.
Yeah.
15 million for a guy who hit 38 home runs 2 seasons ago. I really, the optimist in me really wants to excuse his down year as like, man, they won
Played on
40
the
games
White
this
Sox.
year.
Hmm.
Right. I mean, would you like a guy to ball out even when the team sucks? Yeah, I mean, that's wishful thinking. That's a Disney movie. The reality is it's hard to not get discouraged when your team is that bad. It's
Yeah.
hard to give it your absolute elite best performance. So, yeah, yeah, I don't know. A guy that the numbers are just impressive. Center
Hmm.
field, move him over to right field. We've got Dalton in center.
Hmm.
15 million you're on the hook for this year. Man, that's appealing. Even if he shows any signs of life, you take that $20 million option for 2026 and you go, okay, he's trending in the right direction. If he's, but trends down again or whatever, you still have another option for the third year. And he's still only
Yeah.
26.
Yeah.
That would take a lot, I think, to get him off the White Sox, though. I think the White Sox, even though they might not be
No, they're aware of the value Luis Robert Jr. has. And
even
you
coming
know
off of the
what?
down season, like,
I didn't think you'd come up with a scenario that I would be like, you know what, I would be fine with that over Brent Rooker and Mason Miller. I think you did it though. I think Devin Williams and Luis Robert Jr. I would be equally as happy with.
okay, I'm proud of myself for impressing you. You put a lot more work in than I do. So I'm impressed. I'm impressed with myself. All right. Pat on the back.
Going to Patreon. Of course, the Patreon bump is a very real thing. If you give us the $4 a month, we are going to make sure to get your questions and comments in. Wyatt reached out. He goes, "It's the famous Al Pacino line. I try to get out, but they keep pulling me back in. Why won't people let me not get my hopes up about Juan Soto?" And Wyatt, I don't know, man. It's just he's such an enticing piece for whatever organization. And I know Blue Jays fans are saying we can't get excited, but I just read a thread from Chris Black, friend of the show, at Down to Black on Twitter. And basically everything he said is what the Blue Jays have needed for like 10 years. The Blue Jays have been one of the most right-handed heavy lineups in the last decade. Forget about this current crop they've got going. We're talking back to, he even said all the way back to 2008, this is one of the most right-handed heavy lineups in baseball. Um, and despite this organization's attempt to bring in left-handed bats, they didn't really bring anyone in of significance, right? That really moves the needle. I mean, sure, you can throw in left-handed bats, sprinkle those through within the lineup, but if they're not creating chances, if they're not doing damage, it doesn't really matter. And Juan Soto would bring the biggest, baddest left-handed bat in a long time in baseball to the team. So of course that's appealing. And yes, the Otani snake bite has created this feeling of trepidation amongst us to even get our hopes up. And I'm there with you. And I'm not here to say get excited about Juan Soto. It is cool that this is an organization that has the financial might to even be mentioned. I know I'm rubbing people the wrong way just saying this stuff, but I, I don't know. I understand the excitement over Juan Soto, and I know that Chris Black laid out like the best starts by a left-handed hitter up to the age of 26. And I mean, if you look at the list, he's literally an iconic level of names, all Hall
Mhm.
of Famers. So you are getting a sure thing. You're getting a pretty much sure bet.
I'd love to see Ross Atkins prepping for a sit down with Juan Soto and doing a little pre courting Juan Soto. Is that what we're doing?
Right.
A little pre-courting press conference um, where he refers to Juan Soto as, look, I'm not sure he's a generational talent.
Yes. Time
He's
will
really
tell.
good.
Yes.
Time will tell. Time will tell. I too early to tell if Juan Soto is
Potentially.
a generation. Potentially.
Potentially
This is the thing.
generational.
We believe in the talent he potentially has. He's a great guy, but
Just
we
to
don't know yet.
warm him up, right? Just to get him,
Well,
yeah.
you don't want Juan Soto to have too much leverage in negotiation. Right? You got to go in there and be able to lowball them. And you don't want Juan Soto pointing to saying, hey, you just called me generational. So pay me what I'm worth as a generational player. You
Sticking
don't
with
want
Juan
Soto
Soto,
feeling like, damn, I still got to prove myself in Toronto. Wow. Okay, sure. 350. Let's do it.
it's motivation.
With an opt out in case I
Get
prove
Ross to
myself.
motivate him. Yes.
Right.
So sticking with Soto, Mark Drabert from Patreon says, if it's not Toronto, I hope Soto ends up signing in a small market city for some completely obscure reason. Soto signs in Milwaukee and claims it's because that's where his favorite donut shop is. Yeah, I mean, if
Mm-hmm.
Soto's not going to go to a New York or the Dodgers, maybe
Mm-hmm.
a small upstart market would be really fun to see, obviously. Um, where's the funniest place you think he could sign? The Angels? Do you think the Los Angeles Angels would be the funniest spot, landing spot for Juan Soto?
Yeah, probably.
Probably, right?
Boris comes in, he goes, Juan, I have a deal that's going to send you to LA. And
Yeah,
he's like, I'm in. Didn't realize the fine print said Angels. Amazing.
yeah.
Yeah, that's great.
Mish and Patreon says Phantom Fridays. A podcast may appear, it may not.
What a
Yes.
shot. Ruthless.
Yeah, Ruthless Mish. We did miss the
Well
last couple
deserved, but
Fridays,
ruthless
so
nonetheless.
yes. Last Patreon before we get into our YouTube comments. This is from Trevor. He goes, been listening to a few pods. Samson, of course, David Sampson, friend of the show.
Mhm.
Heyman, Passon, BNS, Ben Nicholson Smith, another friend of the show. We just don't have the money left for a big off season, and our trade chips are meh. We are not getting Soto. He just doesn't have the global business revenue value of Otani, which is a very fair point. Hall of Fame player, but he just doesn't. A lot of fans don't understand we are already at 75% of revenue for our payroll. This is something you and I took the stat of before, Adam. And the Blue Jays really are like their revenue compared to payroll were one of the smallest percentages left over, right? Like they really are spending.
Yeah, like just I've got this number pulled up in front of me here. So this is Blue Jays are the second highest percentage of revenue goes to payroll. So the Mets have a team revenue in 2023 of 393 million and a 2024 payroll of 342 million. So they spent 87% of their revenue the previous season on this season's payroll. The Jays were in second place, going from 328 million in revenue last season to 246 million this season, 75%. And just of note, Dodgers 549 million in revenue, 330 million in payroll. Yankees all the way down at spot 18, believe it or not, despite spending 316 million on payroll. It was only 46.5% of their revenue from the previous season at 679 million. That's what they made.
And that's where the idea of the Jays getting Soto does get muddy, is that yeah, the Yankees have a lot more space to play with when it comes to the revenue they're making. It's not just about getting under the luxury tax, right? I mean, these are all businesses, and that's one thing to keep in mind is yeah, profits matter. So the Jays are kind of up against it. Trevor ends his comment with we are rolling it back for the most part and praying for a third wild card, aren't we? Question mark, crying emoji. So um yeah, I mean, this front office is going to need to get incredibly creative to pull off a contending team in 2025. We've mentioned this before. I don't know. I mean, Adam and I, both of us, don't really have the trust in the front office to pull this off. Blue Jays fan first, though.
Um,
And I would gladly walk back any ill comments about Mark Shapiro and Ross Atkins if they prove me wrong. So please prove me wrong. But I will say, yeah, a really, really skilled front office would have a tough time turning this into a contender. And I don't know if this is a really, really good front office.
I would say there is creative accounting going on in Toronto and the Rogers Sportsnet of it all. This is something that actually, speaking of David Sampson, addressed last week on his podcast. If anybody's interested, comment and I'll send you the link with a timestamp to the video where he specifically talks about this issue. But he talks about Shohei Ohtani and the uh, single-handed revenue generation that he actually does, right? A lot of people like to speculate on, oh, that contract pays for itself and blah, blah, blah. I don't believe so. Spoiler alert, neither does David Sampson, former owner of the Expos Marlins franchise. Anyways, he touches on the fact that of like team revenue sharing in this podcast. And one thing worth noting with the Blue Jays is a TV contract money, 48% of it apparently goes towards the revenue sharing between the haves and the have-nots of MLB franchises. So the Yankees, latest estimate I could see, about $143 million a year is what the Yankees get in revenue from the Yes Network to be the primary, if not exclusive, broadcasters of Yankees games. 143 million. Blue Jays, 40 million is what Sportsnet technically gives the Blue Jays. Now, they're all owned under the same umbrella, is where the shenanigans happens.
Right.
But it is like pretty open speculation to say the Blue Jays are being underpaid fair market value for broadcast rights for the Blue Jays on Sportsnet. But that is because if they were to pay 140 million instead of 40 million, 70 million of that goes into the revenue sharing pot. So you're basically just donating money to the other teams at that point, right?
Ah,
So when we do look at like the numbers of like revenue versus payroll, and the Blue Jays are at 328 million in revenue, that's the Blue Jays as the Blue Jays entity, right? That is jersey sales, ticket sales, corporate sponsorship at the stadium, this sort of stuff. It Rogers and what they generate as revenue through their vertical integration with Sportsnet, the numbers are a little bit better than what that would indicate, right? So to say we don't have the money in our coffers to pull off Juan Soto, I just think is maybe not true. Like, I think,
Yeah, it's not in the coffers because they don't want to send a bunch of money to Pittsburgh. But that's yeah,
but I mean,
the
like,
revenue
it's not,
sharing thing's really interesting, dude. I didn't even
yeah.
think of that. I'm glad you brought that up.
So it's just when you look at like how much do the Blue Jays make versus how much does the Rogers family, or 28 million from the team, but then they also make money from the team through Sportsnet, right? Like through all
Mhm.
those 160 games a year on Sportsnet, right? So
Yeah.
there's money to have Juan Soto if that's the direction that Rogers wanted to go. I This isn't me trying to say get your hopes up. We're in the running,
Yeah.
because I do think that's fool's gold that we're chasing. But I would say I think we do have the money to get Juan Soto and keep Vlad, maybe, and Bo. But I think Bo leaving is a separate thing from
Yeah.
money. I
Yeah.
think that's a much more complicated issue. But I do think we have the money as a Rogers ownership group looking at what they make from the Blue Jays as a whole. I think we have the money for Juan Soto at top market value, at Vladdy with no discount, and still money for pieces around it.
Hmm.
Now, will we do it? Would Juan Soto even take an offer to go into Toronto? Even if
Time
it's
will
the,
tell.
the highest offer, that's a
Who
big
knows?
question, right? How much are we willing to overpay to get a guy like Juan Soto? And if you have to overpay, do you really want him? Is the other question, right? If a guy really doesn't want to be in Toronto and we got to go up an extra 50 million on top of the 600 we're already giving him or everybody else's, maybe he just really doesn't want to be here. And maybe that should be a red flag we shouldn't ignore. But I think we do have the money.
Going to YouTube. This is from at Blue Jays fan one. He goes, Adam, thank you for mentioning Danny Jansen. I, for one, would love to see him come back. Forget his offense, forget his defense, and his knowledge of the pitching staff. He is just a very valuable piece. Edit. You talked about Soto being the face of a franchise. They already have a player on the payroll who is and should continue to be that. Sign Vladdy for 10 years and move on. Uh, yeah. I
Yeah.
mean, Adam and I have been big Jano fans since day one, so love the idea
Mm-hmm.
of Danny Jansen returning. They need a backup catcher, anyways. Who knows if they bring one up from internally? It just doesn't seem like there's a lot of options there. Will be interesting to see how they fill that second catcher. And yeah, obviously, Vladdy signing long term with the Jays would be fantastic.
What, just as a question here, what would you say is a good OPS to have? Like, what is your gut punch feeling when you look at an OPS and you go, did a guy have a good year or a bad year? Don't worry about positions, just like offensively in our batting order. What is you're like obviously 900, you're like, oh, that's great. But if you're
Okay,
just looking
so
at a guy, the
this,
seven spot in your lineup,
I honestly, dude, I have no math as to why I think this way, but I do
okay.
have numbers in my head that I always am like, okay. So if a
Hmm.
guy has a 785 OPS but doesn't hit for much power, I'm like, that guy, give him to me. Put him in my lineup. I love
Okay.
that, right? Because
Mm-hmm.
at a 785 OPS, if he doesn't have a ton of power, let's say he's hitting 10 to 15 home runs, he's still getting his hits, right? He's
Mm-hmm.
hitting some doubles, he's driving in some runs,
Mm-hmm.
785. If he is your middle of the order guy with power, I
Mm-hmm.
want 820.
Yeah,
And
that's
that's where
fair.
I'm happy.
That's fair. I'm going to use your 785 number then. Um, Last season, 2024, among full-time catchers, and I'm just setting the number of games played at 100 for
Yep.
catchers to be a full-time guy, right? I don't expect to see 150 games out of your catcher. That's uncommon. Guess how many catchers across the NL and AL, so both leagues, guess how many catchers had a 785 or better OPS and were the majority catcher on their team?
God. I don't. Two?
Two, Scott. Yeah, two. So William Contreras with the Brewers, 155 games played, 831 OPS. Salvador Perez with the Royals, 158 games played, 786 OPS, just squeaked in there. Give them to me. So, in defense of Danny Jansen not being good offensively, catchers aren't good offensively, is my point.
Well put. Going to Dalton here. He goes, when John Schneider's eventual exit happens, whether through termination or the
I love
natural
this
end of his
comment, by the way.
by the natural end of his contract, are you still on board with Stubby Clapp? It wouldn't it would be so cool to have a Canadian manager, and I think he could do a really good job. I'd love to see the Blue Jays hire from outside the organization for some new perspective. Dolce, love this idea. I mean, we've been on the Stubby Clap train. Speaking of interviews that were really interesting and evergreen, check out our Stubby Clap interview from a few years ago. He talks baseball, he talks his rise up to the major leagues. Of course, he only had a few cups of coffee, but he did get there and, of course, became famous for his backflips which he does get into. Asked him the last time
Mm-hmm.
he tried a backflip, and the story is pretty funny. He
Mm-hmm.
uh, he had to stop doing it after a fall, right?
Yeah.
he like he just got too old for backflips. But yeah, I would love Stubby Clapp as a manager for this Toronto Blue Jays team, and not just because he is Canadian. I really do think the baseball knowledge in that mind would be incredibly valuable to this organization. And there is something to be said about coming up through the Cardinal way. And I know that the St. Louis Cardinals are not where they used to be statistically, but still a very good franchise, a storied franchise that has always seemed to do things the right way. And yeah, plus he gave us time on the podcast. So I'm biased.
Yeah, I'd love it.
Okay, Mantis Toboggan, Doctor Mantis Toboggan commented. He goes, apologizing to people on social media for your opinion is like apologizing to a toddler after they've thrown a tantrum. Scott, you are a true polite Canadian. Loved the Gattaca reference. We're not here for your sophisticated intelligence, boys. Never change. As a straight man in your chat, I was screaming Grishik. What a handsome man. How could you forget Randall and those eyes? Yes, we did have a brain fart last mailbag where we were trying to come up with the name of Randall Grishuk, and it took us way too long for the name to come to us, but we did get it eventually. And as for the apologizing part, he's just mentioning how Adam and I said some comments about the New York fans that grabbed Mookie Betts's glove, that rubbed some people the wrong way. And that's what
Yeah.
that was about. Going to Bob McCullen's comment here, kind of in the same vein. He goes, Scott, don't apologize for calling an ugly a-hole ugly. Uh, I'm sure he's seen a mirror at some point. People need to grow up and stop being crybabies. It wasn't even them you were making fun of. Geez. So
There you go.
numerous comments like that. Thank you for those of you who have our back. And you know what? I still can shoot my mouth off and be a dumbass and, cross a line. And so if you felt that way about our comments, that's why I was apologizing. Anyways, last comment here goes to Craig Buckholes. Great name,
Hmm.
Buckholes. I can get behind that name, you know? Give me a leader with the name Buckholes. I'll follow him. I'm down. He says, "Hey guys, first time responding. Your videos and presentations are the absolute best out there. Thank you. As for Soto, he's already started last week. He's not going to accept a contract deferral package, which is true. A la Otani. Today, I noticed a report regarding the Jays' budget and their 2024 overage bracket. Apparently, they intend to maintain a more modest budget for 2025. Signing Soto, therefore, as a possibility seems more and more unlikely. Again, super long shot with Soto. Um, Adam, there's creative ways around 2025, though, correct? I guess not with AAV being, however you
The
do it,
be
you
all
still got to
end
deal
all.
with AAV.
Yeah, I don't know. I do feel like any path forward with Juan Soto on the club, you're pretty much
You're paying them.
you're factoring in that you're going to be paying taxes.
Yeah,
Yeah.
that's what it feels like.
Yep. I don't know.
Grounds crew, thank you so very much for following along. Feel free to drop your questions or comments for next mailbag here. If we hit on any topics that you were passionate about or had questions about, feel free
Hmm.
to drop your comments. You can always reach out on Twitter at Walk Off Podcast. The same goes for Bluesky now at Walk Off Podcast, where us liberals are going to hide from conservatives, I guess. And
Are you still on Twitter though? Are you
what's that?
abandoning Twitter? Are you still doing Twitter or are you
Yeah,
abandoning
I'm
Twitter
still on
for Blue
Twitter.
Sky? Okay.
Huh. Oh yeah. I'm in the
Copy and
cesspool.
paste your
I'm in the
posts from one to the
cesspool
other.
and the clean pool. Look at me. Just
Here you
try
go.
and stop it.
There you go.
Instagram, the Walk Off Podcast, and then you can always reach out as a Patreon member. You get the Patreon bump. We are very appreciative for everyone who is a member of that club. Thank you very much, everybody. We will see you on Friday. Just a reminder, we do have the one and the only Andrew Stoughton joining us Thursday. We'll release that Friday as our Friday show. And yeah, we'll go from there. Take care, everybody.
Cheers.
Cheers.